So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you some sample tests. I've got some students that were tested. Their moms submitted. So I have a student. I love this name. Her name is Zipporah. That is a Bible name. Moses, I believe, married Zipporah. Okay, and so Zipporah was tested, and Zipporah is 9 years old. Okay, so she is 9 years old. She's she's entering third grade. So Zipporah took diagnostic test number 1. So for those of you who have your Spelled Write and Read books, you can look at the diagnostic test on page, is it 199? Okay, so the diagnostic test is on page 199. Now, what I see with Zipporah's test, so I'll show you some really quickly. This is her writing. This is Mom's writing. What was the word that she got wrong? What was the actual word that we were looking at? And that's very helpful to do. Write the word, the correct word next to it, so you can see what they were attempting to spell. And that's going to help you understand, you know, where some problems are. So Zipporah's first mistake was at word number 8. She got total of 9 words. She was able to go through 24 words, and notice Mom did a great job of getting subsequent errors. So we're pretty sure by the time we got here that Zipporah was done. She was not going to give us any more correct, and she probably was maxed out. Okay, so that's fine. We're good. Zipporah's good job, Zipporah. You took a great test. Okay, so her first mistake was at word number 8. She got 7 words right. Then she had 3 mistakes. Then she got a word right, 2 mistakes, another word right, and then the rest were errors. Okay, so that's really helpful information. So the first mistake was at word 8. So what were the 2 pieces of information that I want to look for? I want to look for total correct, and I want to look for her first error. Total correct is going to give me grade level. Now, if you're taking notes, this is a good thing to write down. On page 198, right at the top of the page. Okay, so if you've got your book, or when you download it from the website, you can also write it up there. This is what you're looking for. Write it up at the top of that page. Total correct equals grade level. First error equals, I like to call it mastery, but in the book it's referred to as tension of learning. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. So what was Zipporah's total correct? She got 9 words total correct. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to page 198 in Spelled Write and Read, and I'm going to look and see total correct gives me grade level. Okay, so I'm going to go down the first column and 9 words right here, and I go, so total correct is 9, and I slide my finger right here. And so Zipporah's grade level is 2.3. So she's going into third grade, and her grade level is 2.3. So what that means is she's doing as well as we would expect a student in second grade in about the 3rd month of second grade. So Zipporah is a little bit behind. That's not a big deal. That really isn't a big deal as far as, oh, let's freak out. No, it's not a big deal at all. She's close. She needs some work. That's okay. That's what we're here for, right? We're going to work on it. Okay, so the first thing I look for is total correct. I go down the first column. I look for the number of total correct, and then I slide my finger to the second column, and there is her grade level. Okay, so then what I do is on the top of the test, I write 9 correct, and then I put the grade level right there, 2.3. Okay. All right, now I want to know what was the next piece of information that I wanted to know. I want to know first error. Okay. So her first error was at word 8. All right, so now I'm going to go back to my chart. Now, I know that this says words correct, okay? But I'm also going to use this column to find word number 8. Okay, so word 8, and then I slide across to this column, and it says H. Okay, now what on earth does H mean? That's talking about where in the spelling list she's entering her understanding of the phonics code is around list H. Okay, let me explain. The spelling list is broken up into 26 different sections, and they are titled by letters of the alphabet. That does not mean that all of the words in section A start with the letter A, It just means that instead of calling it lists 1 through 26, we're calling it list A, list B, list C, all the way up to list Z, okay? It's just a way that we refer to the list. So, according to this, her mastery is around list H. Now, let me explain something. I will never place a student in list H as a starting place. Let me show you. This is from the Spell to Write and Read book. Okay, this is a little chart that is on page 65. When we're testing for the first time, this is going to help us place the student. When we have a student that's been using it before, we may or may not use this diagnostic test for it's going to be part of the picture, but not as much as the first time. So let me show you this little chart. This is from the Spell to Write and Read book, page 65. A lot of people forget to read this, okay? So what does this tell me? Do you see, this is all the places in the WISE list that we would want to start a student. Do you see list H anywhere there? Nope. We do not see list H. So H is not a starting place. All right. If the student misses from 1 to 10 words, not 1 to 10, words number 1 through 10, okay? If the student's first error is there, we would typically start at A. If they miss the first error is 11 or 12, meaning word number 11 or 12, then we would start at J. Okay, and so this little chart, again, this is on page 65 in Spell to Write and Read. This chart helps us determine where a good place to start would be. So we have a girl who's getting ready to go into 3rd grade, and her mastery level is in this first area. So let me explain. When I talk about giving the diagnostic test, that is step 4 of the scope and sequence. All right. And now what we're doing is we're looking at placement. That's step 11. All right. So we have step 4 is giving the test. Step 11 is using the test to determine placement in the WISE guide. Step 4, step 11. They go together. I don't ever do step 4 without looking at step 11. I give the test and then I use that to help determine placement. So I do those together, okay? But a lot of people forget about the step 11 and all the information that's in step 11. So if I used this test, if I used Zipporah's test, and that was the only factor that I was looking at to place her, I would have to start her at list A, okay? Because that's where she tested. But that's not the only thing I want to look at, because she is 3rd grade. If I start her at A, then I'm going to be teaching kindergarten, 1st grade words. And maybe by the end of the year, I will be, let me look at my, well, here, I'm going to show you a page that I'm looking at. Okay. This is page 64 of Spell to Write and Read. This is also in the section talking about placement, okay? This is a very important page. So let's take a look at where a 3rd grader, let's pretend we weren't looking at diagnostic test information, and we just wanted to know where is a good place for a 3rd grader to start. M. List M. Wow. So if I start her at A, and I plug away at 20 words a week, by the time I get done, I'd be at L. I'd be just getting ready to go into where a 3rd grader would normally be starting. So Zipporah would be behind all year, behind where I would want her to be because of her age. Now, Zipporah might need to be at a lower level. You know, if she needs a lot of work with her phonemic awareness. I don't think she's English as a 2nd language. I think she's English as a 1st language. And I looked at the kinds of mistakes she's making. And you know what? I think she's going to catch on really quickly. So I'm even though she tested as a mastery level of A, I would be very reticent to start her there. So I would probably want to start her, I think, list J, and making it a goal this year to work through list J all the way to list O. I think starting Zipporah at J and making it a goal to get all the way to list O would be a much more appropriate place to start her. Because remember, I talked about we want to start where the student's mind is engaged. Part of her issue with the words that she got wrong, they're not that wrong. See, with spelling, it's like, okay, they get one letter wrong, boom, it's wrong. But when you look at how close she is, I don't think she's that far off. And I think if you work with her this year, she is going to really surprise you at how well she picks up on this, because she's got some really good skills. It's wrong, but it's close, and that's important. If she was like just not a clue, I'd say, okay, you've got a lot more of the foundation that needs to be worked on. So I believe for Zipporah, because of her age, because the mistakes she's making are not that far off, I would actually be more inclined to start her at list J, make a goal of working all the way through section O. Now, let me explain. It says here, second grade, 40 words a week. If you plot out your entire year, and like I said earlier, it's consistency that really is huge, important. You don't need to go at 40 words a week all year. At the beginning of the year, you're only going to be doing 20 words a week. You can beef up when you're going. You can maybe jump up to 30 words a week. What you need to do is sit down with a calendar and kind of plot it out. But frankly, I rarely go 40 words a week. If I have to really pick up the pace, I'll go 30 words a week. Now, let me say one thing. The words that are in lists A through I, notice we're skipping those words. We're not teaching A through I if we start at J. A through I words are 50% of what we read and write on a regular basis. They're very important words, and Zipporah needs those words. So, oh my goodness, we're not getting those words if we start at J. Yes, we are getting those words, because when you get to list M and N, part of the review activities that are in lists M and N are to review words from A through I. So any words that she doesn't know, you're going to teach. You're going to give her quick little quizzes. If you're using the worksheet activity books, there's activities built in right in there for you, and you just give a quick little quiz, and then any of those words, A through I, that she doesn't know, I got to make sure I'm pointing the right thing, then you would be teaching those words. So she's going to get them. And then the following year, when you started at M, she's going to get them again. So she's going to get those words. Don't worry about that, okay? So that's what I would do with Zipporah. I would start her at list J, given where she, how she tested, but more importantly, where she is, her age, and the fact that she is not far off. I think she's going to do great. So I would start Zipporah at list J. Okay, let's take a look at another student. Julie submitted her son Luke's test. Luke is 9.5 years old, okay? And so I'll just show you briefly. This is Luke's test. This is a photograph copy, so that's why it looks dark. But again, I looked at, for two pieces of information when I looked at Luke's test, okay? And I'm going to look for two numbers, total correct and first error. Okay, with Luke, total correct was 19. Okay, remember, he's 9.5 years old. So let's go to my chart. Okay, and I'm going to find word 19, which is over here. Total correct gives me grade level. So Luke is 3.7 with his grade level. Now, a 9.5-year-old is usually about 4th grade, maybe 4th grade. And so he's close. He's close to where he needs to be. Okay. So, you know, he needs to pick up the pace, but he's not that far off from where we would expect a beginning 4th grader to be. Now, the other piece of information I need to know is, where was his first mistake? His first mistake was at the word 8. Now, let me tell you something about diagnostic test number 1. The word that is on diagnostic test number 8, that is the word led. Okay? This is the word led, as in I led the parade. Okay? Do you know how many adults have a problem with that word? People do not understand that that's an irregular past tense verb. Okay? It's very easy to spell, And when a child is operating only on the sounds they hear, they actually get it right. But a lot of kids that have some reading and writing ability get it wrong because they don't know that irregular past tense verb. So this is the thing. Let me tell you about that word. It is very common for people to make mistakes on that word. Okay, and then what we see is they make a mistake at word number 8, and then they don't make a mistake for like 10, 12 more words. They get a bunch right. Okay, I am not going to place a student because of that first error being at word number 8, if there's a whole bunch of words that are correct after it. So now with Luke, he got word number 10 wrong. So he got word 8. Of course, he spelled it. This is how people like to write the word led, as in I led the parade. Okay, this is the correct spelling. So this is what Luke did. Exactly what is typical for kids his age. Very common mistake, all right? So if he had done that, if he had done word 8 wrong, and then I didn't see another mistake until, say, word 20 or something like that, I would mark word 8 incorrect for total correct. It is wrong, okay? But I would not use that as my first error for placement. Now with Luke, he did get word 10 incorrect also. So when I go to my little chart, notice here, he missed 2 words that were in words 1 through 10. He missed word 8 and he missed word 10. All right, so according to this, I would need to start him in A. Am I going to start a 4th grader? I'm assuming that he is just starting SWR for the first time. Let me just tell you, his next error was word 10. And the word is spring, like the spring was trickling down through the mountain, spring. Okay, and he wrote it, and he had the R, and it looks like he erased it. So it turned out to be sping. And so that looks to me like he had it correct, and then he self-corrected wrong. Obviously, it's wrong, okay, but I'd love to know what happened there, that he erased something that had made the word correct and then he did it wrong. So I'm a little curious why he did that. So I'm not going to put him at A. I am not going to put Luke at A because he's an older student. He's going into 4th grade. I do not want to be teaching Luke kindergarten, 1st grade words. I want to get him going on vocabulary that's more appropriate for his age level, and I want to engage Luke, because he's 4th grade. He's like, Mom, I'm done with spelling. He obviously needs some work, but you need to get Luke's brain going. You need to get him engaged and have him solving the mystery of these words and engaging the detective, because spelled right and read rules are extremely consistent, and we want to get him, figuring out the logic. I had a 7th grade student I worked with one time, and he loved coming in with new words that he knew were going to beat my system. He never could. I was able to explain everything, but he was totally engaged and he wanted to do that. That's the kind of thing we want to get Luke going excited about. So his next error was at word 12. Okay, so his next error was at word 12. So right there, that would tell me placing him at J would be a possibility. And then he didn't make another error until 19. And his error at 12 was the word blue. And I think he put the L at the very end of the word. So he's got some issues sounding things out and making sure that he's representing every sound that he hears by a letter that he's writing. So that's something, Julie, if you're watching this later in the replay, make sure that that's something that you want to work with him in. Is really getting across the point that when we hear a sound, we need to represent it with a letter. But you know what? His first real error was at 19. So yes, he made 3 errors, but then he made a bunch of right ones. He got a bunch of words right. And then the next word was suffer, and he forgot to double the F. So let's take a look at 19. If I were to say 19 was his first error, 19 is right here, N. I've got a dilemma. One word, or 2 of the words tell me to start at A. One of the words tells me to start at J. And the next one starts at N. Which one do I take? All right. With Luke, I would start him in M. I would start him at M. Why? Because that is a good place to start somebody who needs to get up and running with the program. And I'm going to review A through I. Remember, when I teach sections M and N, I'm going to include review of words in A through I. And I'm going to get him closer to his level of vocabulary that he needs to be. And all of the problems that Luke is having are going to be cleaned up when I work with SWR. So for him, I would actually start him at list M. I wouldn't start at N because I want to make sure to get the review. See, when I start at M and I make it my goal to get to S, I will be including review of A through I. Whenever I teach M and N, that review is automatically in there. So for Luke, I would suggest starting him at M. All right, so I hope you see that there's other factors besides just the numbers. What do the numbers show? Now, let's talk about the question was, what if I have multiple students? Okay, so Luke's younger brother, Dawson, also took the test. Okay, and Dawson, I'm not going to go through everything. What's the first thing I need to look for is total correct. He got 6 correct. So according to this, 6 correct, he's at 2nd grade. That's exactly where he is. He's entering 2nd grade, and he is 7.5 years old. So he's doing great. Okay, so Luke is 2nd grade. His first mistake was actually word number 1. So, and he made a lot of mistakes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He missed 5 out of the first 10. Luke needs to start at A. Sorry, Dawson. Sorry, I apologize. Dawson is the younger brother. He's 7.5, 2 years younger than Luke. Now, here we have a mom. She's got Luke, who's I'm assuming 4th grade. He's 9.5. I suggest that he started M, and now Dawson is starting. I suggest he started A. How is mom going to handle that? There are all kinds of things that you can do together. Okay, once you've taught all 70 phonograms, then you can do your phonogram drill together. What you give on your little quiz needs to be specific to what you're teaching that day, because I like to include on my phonogram quiz the multi-letter phonograms that are coming up in that list. So if you go back and watch the video on sorting out the 2 levels, I talk about that. Also teaching phonograms, I talk about the 2 different ways that we review phonograms. So, but we can flash our cards together. There are reference pages that can be taught together. You can teach both of the boys the consonant and vowel pages together. You could teach them the multi-letter phonogram pages together. When Luke needs to, say, do the eavesdropping rule, there's nothing that says you can't pull that out of order and have Dawson do that at the same time. So there are things you can do together. I like to have a phonogram game at least once a week where we're reviewing the phonograms. I like doing it at the end of the week. My test day tends to be shorter, and so that's a great time to throw in a game. They can be doing that together. But yes, they need to be working at their own levels when it comes to dictating the words. Now, a way to do that, because you're going to be trying to teach a lot of words to Luke, whereas with Dawson, he would only be doing 20 words a week if you're doing A to L, okay? 20 words a week, A to L, whereas Luke needs to bump up to at least 30 words a week once you get up and started for the year. So after about the first 6 weeks of school, you want to bump up to maybe 30, maybe a couple weeks during the year you need to do 40 words a week. But for the most part, if you stay at 30 words a week and then slow down a little bit at Christmas and then get back up to speed once the holiday's over and then slow down once spring fever hits, you'll see that you can accomplish everything that you want to. You got to chart it out. You got to kind of see how it lays out so that you know where you're going and you end up where you want to be. But instead of thinking I have to teach new words on Monday and Tuesday, okay, yes, I'm talking about multi-level. Okay, what I want you to do instead is think day 1, day 2, 3, 4, 5 of your routine. Okay, this is assuming you have 5 days for your teaching. Okay, so I have day 1, day 2, 3, 4, and then 5 is test day. Okay, and phonogram games. what I like to do is the first day of the week teach half the list, whatever I'm teaching that week, and then teach the second half on the second day. So if I'm teaching 20 words that week, 10 words are taught on day 1, 10 words are taught on day 2. If I'm teaching 30 words that week, 15 on day 1, 15 on day 2. Okay? And then after the 2 days are over, then I've taught my words for the week. And then I have 2 full days for reinforcement. And then on the last day, I can do my test and my phonogram game and whatever else I need to accomplish. I'll do that another time when I talk about lesson planning. But this is what you do. You stagger when you're teaching those. So Luke, his day 1 and day 2 would be Monday and Tuesday. Dawson's day 1 and day 2 would be Wednesday, Thursday. So you're not having to teach 25 words to 2 different kids in one day. So in other words, on Monday, maybe that's Luke's day 1, and I would teach him his 10 or 15 words. And then on Tuesday, that's Luke's day 2, but that would be Dawson's day 5. So I don't know how to explain it. It's kind of like this. Okay, so this is Luke, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Dawson, his 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can't do this. Would look, and then these 2 fingers are back over here. So stagger the days so that you're not having to teach both kids all their word or half their words one day, and then both kids half their words the next day. So what you'd be doing is on day 1 of your week, teach the first kid half the list. Day 2, teach the next kid half the list. Your day 3 is now the second kid's day 1. Teach him half the list. I hope that makes sense. So that's one way to do it. Now, let me tell you another thing. Shannon, you asked the question, grouping them. When you have students who are older, like let's say Luke, he was 4th grade, and then let's say he had an older brother or sister that was just a year or 2 older. The older they are, you can group them, okay? The year that I worked with all 3 of my kids, I struggled with consistency, okay? I would burn out, just let other things get in the way. I did not plot it out like I'm talking about doing. I was kind of like, well, let's see how far we get. And then, of course, we're not going to get very far because I hadn't planned. So, but there was one year where I was determined that I was going to make really good progress that year. And it meant that I had to group my 3 kids. I had 2 boys. At the time, they were 6th and 8th grade, and I had my daughter who was 4th grade. And I tested them all, and sure enough, my daughter, 4th grade, was spelling better than the 2 older brothers. But I had to look at their tests and figure out, based on their skills, where they were. And, I had an 8th grader. The last thing I should have been working on still in 8th grade was spelling, but he needed help. Because I had been so inconsistent when he was younger, okay? So what I did is I put them all together. I started at list, I think I started N that year, and I just taught all 3 of them together. And you know what? They made stupendous progress. By the time I got done with N, I was like, okay, I'm making good progress. I'm being consistent with my lessons, but I'm not going to get to where my 8th grader needs to be at the end of the year. I'm working at this pace. So what I did, this was amazing. By the time I got to list O, I also started teaching from list S. So 20 words I would teach on Monday from list O, and then on Tuesday I would teach 20 words from list S. So I don't know how to do this. I was teaching at O, and then they would turn to wherever in their book S would be, and they would get their 20 words at that level. And we just kept going this way. It was a phenomenal year. It was fantastic. And so I was getting higher level vocabulary. They were intrigued by the spelling words, but I was still working at their level with the O. That just worked fantastic. It was a really great way to do it. But my point is, I was able to put all of my kids together. We're talking, 4 different grade level span, but I put them all together. One time I was teaching a 3rd grader, And his 7th grade brother started joining our tutoring sessions, and I was brand new at this, and I had no idea how to teach a 3rd grader and a 7th grader together. I didn't know how to do it. And so what I did is I got him up to speed on the reference pages that he needed, the consonant vowels, multi-letter phonograms. There were a couple others that I had taught the younger brother that he needed. And so I just taught those to him, and the younger brother benefited from going through those again. And the older brother needed to start at P, but I didn't know how to do that. How do I teach in one session little brother where he was, and he was like at list H at the time, and big brother at P? I just couldn't figure it out. So what I did is I handed the big brother a piece of paper, and I said, oh, you are so far beyond where your brother is. Just humor me and take dictation along with me, and you know, we'll get to where you're supposed to be, but for today, do this. Well, that's all I did. I couldn't figure out at the time how to do P. And so all he got were spelling words at his younger brother's level. Okay? Now, he was the student, the 7th grader was the one who came in every day with words that he thought were going to beat my system. So for 5 minutes at the beginning of every lesson, we would dissect the words that he had brought to me. We would pull them apart into syllables. I would teach them to him using the SWR dictation. We would do the markings, figuring out what the rules were going on. Again, he never beat the system. Every single word he brought me, I was able to explain using the spelling rules and the phonograms. He was in special ed at school, and I didn't know it, but they tested him. Now, he only was with me for 4 months when they gave him the diagnostic testing at school. His reading ability that year went from 5th grade to 8th grade. He was above grade level in his reading at the end of the school year. And if he had not been in special ed for a different issue, he would have been kicked out because he was now reading well above grade level. And they were like, oh my gosh, what happened to this child this year? And I only worked with him for 4 months. And I worked with him at a level that was way below where he needed to be actually placed. So I'm telling you this because, you know, when you start teaching the phonograms and you start teaching the rules, they start understanding how the code works. They start understanding how English works. I would have loved to have gotten to higher level vocabulary with him. I would have loved to figure out how to get P in there. But you know what? That 5 minutes every day that he was bringing me words from his what he was learning at school, guess what? We were working at his level. For 5 minutes every day, I was working at his level. And then he was learning the process with the easier words. Now, he was very highly motivated, and I will tell you, he was engaged because this really, this method really excited him, and he wanted to figure out, you know, how does this work? And I mean, that kid was totally engaged. So even though I never did work at the level in the WISE list that he needed to be, he got it. He got it. His spelling went up. His reading was off the charts as far as special ed was concerned. So that is another situation. Now, I will tell you, it is harder to combine your students the younger they are. So I told you Dawson was 2nd grade. If Dawson and Luke had tested as being similar skill level, I might have put them together. They tested far enough apart, and I believe Julie and I talked about it, and I think she was in favor of keeping them apart. There are some times when it is actually more advantageous to keep your students apart. When I taught all 4 of my kids, I was willing to take more time because of the interaction effect. He touched my paper. She looked at me. Okay, you know, that's what I'm talking about, the interaction effect. It took more time for us to get through our lessons because of all that, but I was consistent, and that was actually more important than taking an extra 15 minutes during the day because of all of the silliness of having to have all 3. I mean, yeah, if I had 1 kid, we could get through it very quickly, but my goal that year was to work on consistency. So there are some times where you'll have, I've heard this, where you have twins, and there's a huge gap in the difference between the 2 students, and teaching them together, you'd have more problems because of personalities. One student would be sitting there bored, the other student is struggling. In that case, I would pull them apart and teach them separately. Even if you're teaching the same lists, sometimes the interaction effect works against you. I will tell you, please don't try to teach more than 3 levels, groups, however you want to say it. Don't try to do 3. See what you can to just do 2. So again, when you're looking at the diagnostic test, you want to look for 2 numbers. Total correct equals grade level. First error is mastery. Now let me just say one thing. When you are placing a student in the program for a subsequent year, you want to take more of these other issues into consideration. What are the lists you covered before? What is the student's age? I have a whole list here. How have you been doing with it? If you've been moving at a snail's pace and you haven't been really getting along, and your student is getting, 18, 19, 20 right on every week's test out of 20, then guess what? You probably need to speed up. Now, Janelle made a point that she was always placing her kids too low in the test. I said at the beginning that I will never use the diagnostic test mid-year as a way of placing the student. The only time I say I might do that, this is very common. You place a student, or you'd give the diagnostic test, and the student needs to start at list M or S or P or something like that. And mom, teacher, is insecure. I don't know how to do this. I don't want to miss anything. If you go back and look at my video on sorting out the 2 levels, you'll understand you're not going to miss anything. Okay, you're gonna still get everything in, but the mom is insecure, and so mom puts student at A. Kid's got great spelling skills, needs to be at list P, and mom is teaching kindergarten words at list A because that's mom's comfort zone. Okay, so let's say the student needed to start at M, okay, and you started at A because that's where you're feeling comfortable. I can teach the word top. I might get into a multi-syllable word and not know how to do my fingers. So I'm going to start at A because then I feel comfortable. Of course, you're boring your kid to death, okay, right? So you give the diagnostic test, and now the student is ready to start at P. This is only 8 weeks later, and they've grown in their spelling abilities. Guess what, Mom? It's time to please jump up to a higher level. That's the only time we suggest that you use the mid-year diagnostic tests to move the student. Do not use the tests every either 6 weeks or 8 weeks, however often you're doing them during the year. Do not keep jumping around to different levels because of where the student tested. Okay? And then also, when you're giving the test in a subsequent year, there's other factors to consider when you're trying to decide on a starting place. And one of those factors is, am I teaching other students? Is there a way I could group my students? If you're using this for remedial reading or spelling, and you've got 5th, 6th, 8th, 9th graders, put them together. Put them together and teach them together. You're going to have to figure out what is the best starting place. When I had my 3 kids together that year, N was low for my 4th grader. It was high and challenging to my middle child. So that's where I had to pick. And you know what? All 3 of those kids flourished that year.